Hello, and welcome to another episode of Stitching Tales, a podcast about all things sewing and what it's really like to run a sewing business. My name is Johanna Lundström. I'm the author of several sewing books, and I also release my own patterns under the brand name The Last Stitch.
And, my name is Malena Hjerpe, and I work as a pattern maker. And I also create my PDF patterns under the name Hazelhen Patterns.
And in today's episode, we're going to talk about a topic which we have touched upon on several previous episodes, but I just realized that we haven't done an episode entirely dedicated to this topic. That is a process you have to go through every single time you're making a garment. But at least nowadays, because I'm just going to bring you way back in time, because in the 80s, there was this woman magazine here in Sweden that ICA-Kuriren, for those listening in Sweden, uh, it it provided in their issue you could order pre-cut fabric to make your own garment. So all you had to do was sew. You did not have to cut it out. So you just picked your size, and then you got an envelope with the fabric pieces pre-cut. I mean,
That's a
dream.
service.
Yeah, that's a service. I don't think it's available anywhere anymore. But that goes to show that sewing in the 80s was definitely a thing, because if I think it was probably the largest magazine in Sweden, one of the largest magazines in Sweden, they had this offering. Those were the days. But yeah,
Yeah, interesting. I was gonna say that. Tricky to do any fitting adjustments then, if
mm,
you needed to do anything. But then again, fashion in the
mm,
80s. I mean, it was kind of a not so tight bodycon fashion. It was like exaggerated in all sorts of ways. So maybe the fit wasn't that crucial in that sense then.
yeah, if yeah, I totally. I as because memory recall, it was pretty easy garment, maybe like a straight blouse or a shirt or a dress, or yeah, as you say, everything was oversized and a lot of straight lines, very little darts, very little fitted silhouettes. So I don't think it was. I don't remember fitting being a big thing. I guess that always becomes tricky if the fashion is more fitted. I can imagine, for instance, during the 50s, I mean, getting the fitting right on all those woven fabrics, that had to be really difficult with those tight fitting seams and everything. And oh, yeah. But that was a little bit of a tangent, but I'm sure everyone probably knows by now what we're going to talk about, which is Malena.
Cutting out your fabrics.
Yes.
And I actually really enjoy this process.
You
It's
do?
yeah, I
Oh.
do. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I know that a lot of people like hate it and it's like so tedious. But I actually really do enjoy it. And I always when I tell people that I work as a pattern maker and they 90% of them like say what? I have no idea of what I'm actually doing. And then I always explain it to them like, well, I mean seamstresses, that like specific job. Well, how do you cut out the fabrics then? Well, that's the templates, the patterns. That's the thing that I create. That's how I basically explain what I'm doing. And then they're like, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah," because you can't obviously randomly cut in the fabric and expect it to be nice. So yeah, maybe that's a little bit also why I do enjoy cutting out fabric because it's so closely related to my job.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So, what are other things that you enjoy about it? Because some of us do find it a little bit tedious.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of like a puzzle,
Mm.
fitting the pieces together, always pressing the fabric before you start doing it so it's nice and crisp and clean and it's just no and I just enjoy the process.
Mm?
It's yeah, I like it. And also
Yeah.
I do have a cutting table, not a huge one but like an okay size, so it's fairly easy for me to do it in a standing comfortable position. If you have to do it on your kitchen floor, I understand it's not the most enjoyable process then.
No, yeah, I very strongly, vividly remember those days when I had to crawl on the floor. and being bent over and trying to keep everything in place. I mean, those were the days, and I'm sure some of you that are listening are in that phase of your sewing and you don't have a dedicated space. So, yeah, cutting definitely becomes easier when you're able to actually do it ergonomically and standing up. It's much, much faster for sure. I also have a cutting table and with a cutting mat underneath, and I also have wheels, and we're definitely gonna post right our cutting tables over at the Instagram Stitching Tales Pod, so you can see what it looks like. But yeah, that has definitely been a game changer for me. So I will say, yeah, I do enjoy cutting more now that when I have a proper setup, and also because I'm not really massive fan of cutting, but also the fact that I usually use a rotary cutter now. So the combination of having a good cutting table and being able to cut faster, that has least made it less painful for me. So that was look, we're gonna do a poll also if you listen to Spotify, if you we can do polls there. Do you like it? Or are you like, no, I just want to start so I'm sure it's definitely a topic that divides us. So is for sure. But I get it. It's funny. But speaking of pattern, because we say in English pattern making, and I think it's pattern constructor. I guess in Sweden, but in I also say
Yeah,
in
directly translated, but
mm,
like pattern maker, pattern cutter,
yeah,
pattern
exactly. Because I was
drafter,
thinking about
like
the pattern cutter as well, because I've seen that in British, like you work as a pattern cutter. And in my mind, that sounds more that what we're going to talk about today, which is cutting out the pattern. But I mean, it
yeah,
is
I
also
mean,
worker.
here English people speaking in those countries,
Yeah.
like help us out here. Like it
Mm,
is because that is also a specific job,
mm,
more like in the industry then, of course.
mm.
But yeah, it is a specific job title that as well that you are cutting out the fabrics because
Yeah.
obviously that needs to be done and it is a skill, and especially in the industry. I mean, they don't cut like a couple of layers of fabric at the same time, like batch
Mm.
cutting. They are cutting through layers, and they
Yeah.
have like basically like a small electronic like saw that
So
they
you're
are.
right.
Yeah, they are sawing out the
Mm,
pattern piece, like fabric pieces, and it's like hundreds of layers
mm.
in that bulk. So yeah, I mean that's a completely different skill set.
Yeah, that's kind of I love watching that kind of videos. I find it very relaxing and inspiring. It seems so nice. Oh, so where should we start? I guess we should start maybe with fabric prepping, I guess, because before you start cutting, you do need to have a few things in place when it comes to fabric. And I guess the first topic is, should you pre-wash or should you pre-wash, Malena? What is your take on that?
I mean, yeah, you should. Do I? No. I mean, it's yeah, it's boring. It's no, but the thing is, I don't pre-wash my fabric if I know the fabric, like I have
Mm,
used it before. I know how it's gonna react in the wash. It's not gonna shrink. It's not gonna change in any drastic way. Then I cut it out like straight. Um, if it's a fabric that I don't know and I'm gonna use that garment, if it's just for like a fitting sample, no, then I'm not gonna waste any time to
mm,
wash it. But then that's not the purpose of to using it. But if it's a fabric that I don't know and I'm gonna use it, I would. The minimum is then to do a little swatch, like cut out like a 10 by 10 or 20 by 20 centimeter, like 4 inches something,
mm,
a square, and have that put that in the washer just to see how does it react, how does it, and in the dryer as well if you plan to dry your clothes. Um, just to see what happens. If it shrinks, that's also why you should measure it before, so then you can actually measure it after to see if it
mm,
has some fabric even becomes a little bit wider, but it shrinks on the length. If it's a pilling issue, if the color is bleeding a lot, maybe then you want to wash it a couple of times even just to get rid
mm.
of the extra wash because otherwise all your other clothes in that washing machine is gonna be dyed. Um, so yeah, I don't pre-wash my fabric that often, but like do it with caution and do it uh, I don't do it when I know I don't need to do it.
Mm. Yeah.
Let's put it at
Because
that.
there are a couple of cons, I would say. I mean, it's always easy to say, "Oh, always pre-wash everything," like a blanket statement, but I would argue that when you pre-wash, you will sometimes struggle with the cutting, because sometimes when the fabric is really nice and flat, when it's fresh off the roll, it's way more easy to cut. But for instance, if you're pre-washing a jersey fabric, for instance, and it's going to be a little bit more tricky to find the grain line, because I mean, not it just changes the hand of the fabric, and it might get a little bit twisted and a little bit harder to, and it's going to be wrinkly, so then you have to maybe iron it out, which again can affect the shape of the fabric. You might risk stretching it out while you're pressing it to press it flat. So I definitely think I am not disagreeing with you, because I think that sometimes it's actually a better idea for just ease, if you are aware, if you know how much it will shrink. And usually most fabrics, they don't shrink that much, so you'd probably just have to add a little bit of extra length at the hem, if you check the shrinkage, and then you're probably good to go, unless you have a very complex style or a fabric that is very prone to shrinkage. For instance, wool fabrics, they have a tendency to shrink a lot lengthwise. At least some, if they are not like boiled wool, but like knitted wool, for instance, that hasn't been pre-treated, it can shrink a bit. But for instance, in my opinion, if you're sewing with a regular jersey and it's made with cotton or rayon, I think it's about 5% or something like that in general. It's not that much when you think about it.
No, and
So
most fabric has actually been pre-shrunk
exactly.
in the
Mm,
factory if it's a good quality fabric.
mm,
And I mean, it has been dyed, it has been then after that it needs to be washed. So it usually has been treated pretty well. But again, it really depends on the fabric and yeah, the quality of
mm,
it basically.
yeah. So in my case, when I do pre-wash, it's usually either if I suspect it's gonna shrink a lot, or secondly, if there's a lot of like other like color residue, as you say. For instance, I just made a pair of jeans in dark denim, and I think I pre-washed the fabric twice, and I still had some bleeding. So it goes to show, as you say, how much color that, it takes a while to get all the extra color out of the fabric. So I put it kind of I got my, like, where I put my iron, where it stand, that turned a little bit blue because of the white
Really?
metal. Yeah. So, and I washed it twice, and it was still
Mm.
bleeding, and also I got a little bit of color also on the white pocket lining as well. So
Mm. But is it
I would not
the
sit on the
indigo then you have?
yeah, it was dark.
Yeah.
I guess it was kind of indigo. It was a really dark denim.
Yeah, because
So
that also
mm,
that is a natural dye color.
mm,
If it's synthetic, then it doesn't bleed
mm.
like at all the same way.
Oh,
But since it is a natural color, it is gonna bleed out. And I mean, we all know. I mean, that's also the effect you want with jeans. You want them to actually be um, look more worn
mm,
naturally, and that's because the color is fading. So it makes sense that yeah, that's gonna happen then to the fabric. So it doesn't have to be in that it's a bad quality of fabric in this case because this is
mm,
very specific
yeah.
denim indigo color. But yeah, just don't mix anything light when you wash it.
No, 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 for sure. I guess that goes with everything. I mean, Malena is our resident washer expert as well. I don't remember the episode name, but we have a very, very thorough run through on how to wash fabrics as well. We should probably do an episode just about that one in the future as well. But yeah, I agree with you. Another example, of course, is if you are a little bit worried about the residue of uh, chemicals as well, which can also be an issue. For instance, another pair of jeans that was already a wash denim, like a stone wash denim. When I started holding, I could feel like a really unpleasant smell of bleach. And so I decided to pre-wash that as well, even though
That's
it was already washed, so it wouldn't have shrunk more because it was already treated. But I didn't want to mess with that, and I think at least in Europe we have a good labeling now. It's called Ökotex, which I think means that the fabric is tested for any harmful residues. So if the fabric that you buy is labeled Ökotex, then you should probably safe as well and not have to worry about getting some bad reactions or some bad stuff happening to your skin or so. Mm.
Yeah, and they said that to us in school that if your fabric smells or garment, or that case as well,
Mm.
if it smells like perfume, it like has a nice smell to it.
Mm.
Um, it's not a nice feature. They are covering something up.
Mm.
So that is also a good sign to, yeah, then it might be good to actually wash it because, and also like some people have more sensitive skin compared to others.
Mm.
So if you have sensitive skin, then maybe you always want to wash everything. So
Yeah.
it really depends. Like no, I don't stand behind the you need to pre-wash every single fabric.
No. No, neither do I. Neither do I. Do so. I think we hope you equipped all of you to have the information at hand. So as with most things, it depends.
It
Yeah,
does.
I'm definitely do not pre-wash. I would say the majority of stuff I do not pre-wash. I will be absolutely upfront with that as well. So I'm in Malena's camp in that situation. The next thing, I don't know if the order, but
Something that I do
mm,
pre always do. Can you guess? It's not
ah,
washing, but it's like the thing that you do after that I do regardless every single time
yeah,
I cut out
press
the
the
fabric.
fabric. Because that
Yeah.
was what I was going to ask you. So what are the next step? Is it pressing or figuring out the grain line? And I guess the answer is
Yeah.
pressing. Right. Yeah.
I
Mm.
always press my
Mm.
fabric. With woven it's a little bit easier because it doesn't stretch out when you press it.
Mm.
With jersey, I'm more careful. I'm taking my time then to press it more lightly with a lot of steam, just to get it nice and flat. Um, because that can affect a lot. If it's a little bit crinkly and it's a little bit like shrunken together,
Mm.
it affects a lot when you actually make a good press.
Totally. Those creases, they eat up so much fabric. Because you can really notice that. We probably all done it if you felt a little bit in a hurry or impatient and cut wrinkly fabric. And then when you press it, it kind of expands substantially. And then the fit will be off and it won't go together as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and
I,
it's
I
also
took,
yeah, no, and also when you press, you see usually the fabric is like folded once and then it's like put on a roll. But that fold in the middle, sometimes it doesn't go away. Um,
yeah.
yeah, so annoying.
Of,
And I want to know that before, if it's gonna go away or not. If I need to, like, place my pattern pieces to avoid that crease or pleat, or if it's fine to place like
mm,
however. And it's also a good way of kind of pre-checking your fabric. Is there any um damages to the like if it's a printed fabric, then maybe sometimes there are some printing mistakes, so like the fabric has been folded when it's printed and then it's yeah it messes it up. Like is there anything like that there, is there any stains, like you check it,
mm.
so you don't end up with you realize something is wrong on the fabric when you have sewn it.
Yeah, that's very good. I agree with you. And I've been guilty of skipping this step and also the crease thing. Yeah, it's so annoying. I mean, I've tried, I mean, I guess usually I guess it's related to being on the roll for a long time and the crease is set. And sometimes you can also have this slightly like bleached line also. So even though you get the crease to flatten out, you will still see a visible line after the crease. So it's again, a very good thing to lie the fabric out flat and get that because it is tempting otherwise. Also, because we like to save the fabric. So, I mean, we all do that when we design patterns as well, that we suggest that you can maybe put a piece on the fold line because,
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely worth checking. Which brings me to my next point, which is figuring out the grain line, because that can be a tricky as well, depending on the fabric, right?
Yeah,
So, for instance,
yeah, not
mm,
so visible all the time.
hmm. So for instance, when we have, if you're sewing with a knit fabric, the grain line is definitely not the selvage, right? Which is the edge of the fabric. And why is that, Malena?
Yeah, I mean, usually it kind of it is, but you can't rely on it. Like you can't
Mm,
measure it exactly from the edge, because of a knitted fabric is usually knitted as a tubular, and then they cut it open, so you can have flat fabric. And usually it is cutted pretty straight along the grain line, but I mean, it can shift a little bit. So that's also like, mm, just be careful with it.
mm,
I usually, when I cut out in jersey or knitted fabric, I see the I try to see on the fabric where is the like the wale, I think it's called. Not
mm.
the horizontal line, but the
The
actual
vertical, yeah.
the vertical, yeah.
Mm,
So that is along the grain line. Um, and I mentioned this several times before, but the row, when you knit the row and the grain line, they are not always 90. They don't have a 90-degree. They are not perpendicular,
mm.
to say.
Yeah.
Not
Mm,
exactly. They are like slightly tilted, the
mm,
horizontal rows. And that's because when you knit a jersey fabric, you don't knit one row at a time. The machine is knitting like 24 rows at one circle, which makes it slightly tilting. And I do this because it's so much faster, which means so much cheaper then. So the more tilting it is, the more cheap, not so good quality fabric it usually is. So there is a fine balance there between time, cost, money, and quality.
mm,
You try to find a good balance there. But that's the reason why it's slightly tilting. So you shouldn't follow the row there, follow the grain line, like the way of
mm.
so that's usually I try to see where it is and follow that.
Yeah. So don't worry, for instance, if you're folding the fabric in the middle along that vertical grain line or rib pattern, that the upper edges might be a little bit slanted, because the only thing that matters is, of course, that vertical line is aligned. And I agree with you. And my personal thing is that if you are struggling, which is something I will talk probably about several times here, is that cut things as a single layer. If you do struggle, uh, so that means that you cut each piece separately. So, for instance, if you're cutting the back piece, which is usually done on the fold, uh, you can just cut half of it, flip it over, or redraft it so it's one singular piece, because then it's so much easier to align, because then you can just align that mid back seam, for instance, along the grain line, and then flip it over or you mirror it. And that in my opinion, I think it's a really good idea, because sometimes it can be tricky, especially if the fabric is a little bit twisted or dark, for instance, or very finely knitted. It's gonna be harder. And by the way, you also, because if you're watching the video version, I'm wearing a striped T-shirt today, made with knit fabrics, and we have a great tip in our book Fit for Knits, where we talk a lot about how to cut knits as well, that you taught me, Malena, and that is when you're cutting something that may be striped or a pattern on a knit fabric, you might have to pick sides, or how should I explain it? You can maybe do a
Yeah, this
better
is
job.
the only
Yeah.
time when it is kind of okay to not follow the grain line like
Mm,
super carefully. Here it's I mean, it is gonna look nicer if the stripes are visually horizontal when you wear
mm,
it. So in this case, follow the stripe.
yeah. So yeah, sometimes that means you have to tilt maybe the pattern piece just slightly, slightly, slightly off grain. And I found that really helpful. I think again you have to do what really draws the eye most, and it's very usually very subtle, because as you say, it's just a very minimal, but over time it adds up. But I don't think I've not noticed it whenever I cut stripes that was an issue for me. So yeah, I agree with you. So that was knit fabrics, and then we have woven, and there are several different ways, I guess, to figure out the grain line. What is your favorite way?
Yeah, I mean, for the woven fabric, it's a little bit easier because then you have the selvage edge, and that
Mm.
is along the grain line. Usually there is like a one thread different colors in the selvage edge, so I usually use that one and
Yeah.
measure to the grain line on the pattern piece, so I get it parallel to that line. If you have cut it away, like it's more like leftover fabric pieces, then of course it's a little bit trickier if you don't have the selvage edge anymore.
Mm.
But try to see on the fabric then how where is the grain line. But I mean, obviously, yeah, selvage edge is the biggest help here.
Yeah. I think that the tricky thing where it can be tricky is that you also have to align it horizontal in a way, because if you don't have a clear folding line in the middle, um, if this on a big roll, it doesn't really help. You have to, even if you line the edges, it you might risk tilting the fabric a little bit, especially as you say, if it's a little bit cut unevenly or so. Um, so two tips that I've been taught, which are basically the same. One is when you're doing a regular woven fabric, is that you cut into the sides and then you tear it all the way. So the theory, depending on the weave, is that when you tear it all the way along the entire width of the fabric, uh, it will be straight. So then you can align both the upper edges and the selvage. That's that's the kind of old school way of doing things. I don't know what's your take on that one. You see it
Yeah, I
sometimes in
mean,
fabric
no, that
stores as well. Mm.
yeah, yeah, that's some fabric does that like beautifully. I mean, you have to leave a little bit of edge because the raw edge that you will
Yeah.
that you tear, it will be stretched out a little bit. So like there has to be a couple of centimeters and inches of for it to be allowed to be stretched out a little. But yeah, that's usually how you cut it in the fabric stores. Not all fabrics can you can't do it to all fabrics, so you need to try it a little bit. And if I have a fabric that's a little bit thicker and you can't do that, I usually and I need to cut something straight. You can like yeah, cut a little notch and then take a thread and try to pull it out. Then
Yeah.
you can also see that you can follow that line then.
Mm.
Um, but it depends a little bit on the fabric also if you're able to do this or not.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on the fabric, and those are the two methods I do a lot. And I think I'm not an expert on this particular topic, but I found a couple of instances that the thread pulling, which is a good way, because if you do the thread pulling rather than the cut and tear, you won't have the issue, as you say, with the stretch out edges. It's much more exact.
Mm.
But I found that on some weaves, I can't trust that pull thread to be absolutely straight, or because it seems a little bit slant. I guess it's depending on the weave. Uh,
Yeah, here I have
mm,
also noticed on some fabrics that
mm,
it is like it feels like the selvage edge and that like that edge they are completely distorted.
yeah.
But if I remember correctly, that was some like lining fabric, acetate fabric, like
Mm,
it's really slippery. So I wonder if that has been like when it has been rolled up, pressed, like it
yeah.
has been a bit distorted during the
Mm,
process. But yeah, I know what you mean.
mm,
Some fabrics have, but these are like more slinky fabrics that have has their own life
yeah.
that I really like. Oh, so hard to
They're
handle.
difficult with everything, from prepping to cutting to
Yeah.
sewing. Yeah. So what I do, if I am a little bit unsure about the thread pulling method, what I actually do now is that I have this wider quilting ruler, which I think is about 15 centimeters or 6 inches wide, and I so it's enough to, I think, to be so I align that along the selvage edge, because that's, if we're talking about woven hair, we know that's going to be straight, and then I just use that to cut, because the length side of it is so wide. I wouldn't use a narrow ruler because then it's so hard to ensure, because it's very easy to start tilting, but because it's about 15 centimeters, I feel pretty confident in cutting. So that's what I do as well, if I just want to make sure that the upper edges are straight as well. Um, but again, if I find if I ever feel unsure, I just do the single layer cutting because
Mm.
yeah, since we're not doing working in the garment industry, it does add a little bit of time, but it's not that much. And I found that if I do that, I never have an issue with the grain line.
Yeah.
So, but normally you can definitely cut on the fold. I mean, most fabrics you can for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, it really depends on the fabric, I would say. And I mean, obviously, when you also place the pattern pieces now on the fabric, be we talked about stripe, but if it has any prints, I mean, we have all seen those pictures when the prints are a little bit ups and down. Maybe we all been
yeah.
been there, done that as well. And
Yeah.
if it also has some naps to it, the
Mm,
fabric that it like they need to be cutted in a certain direction, otherwise the light might make it look different colors, basically, like a velvet or corduroy or
mm,
fabrics like that. So yeah, make sure to check that on the fabric as well. Like, does it look different if you hang it differently?
mm,
Because it will have a huge effect. It might not be so visible when you have it there on the table, but then when you're outside in the light and the legs are cutted in different direction, it will appear to be two colors than if it's like a velvet fabric, for example.
yeah. Yeah, though very good point. I guess it's true mostly for velvet and corduroy. I think those are two main offenders that
Yeah.
it will look massively different if you cut in the opposite direction. It's just completely different fabric. One will look
Mm.
lighter and one will look darker. So it's unfortunately pretty much impossible to rock. And also a good point about the print as well. I've done that mistake I think a couple of times. If the print is subtle, maybe it's like a flower and it looks like it's all over the place. But then when I cut, I realized, okay, but the stems are all in one direction. And I didn't really think because it was a little bit abstract. Uh, so yeah, it's always good to check the print as well. I mean, if it's just little dots, for instance, then usually very symmetrical prints, you don't have to think about it. But as soon as there's a more of a drawing element to the prints, you definitely need to check that everything it's absolutely the same way. And normally, if the more ambitious prints, they always have a clear direction, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. And if an accident has been there and you accidentally
Mm,
cutted something the wrong way, usually nobody will notice it unless you
mm,
point it out. So mm,
yeah.
no need to sweat it that much
Yeah.
if
Or
the accident has already been there.
yeah, or make it as a design feature. I mean, we do see that sometimes on designers that they kind of flip over prints and things like that to add interest to the garment. So that could be also a way of doing it. But yeah,
Yeah.
cutting
Yeah.
cutting
No,
the
and it's
fabric in the same direction is probably a
yeah.
good idea.
Sometimes like you want to like match the prints and to make it matching or um I know also designers, specific children's brand here in Sweden that they have actively said that no, they don't do it because they want to maximize the fabric use because it
Mm,
is going to be more wasteful if you are considering like placement and yeah, because then you
mm,
can't place it as closely as possible. But I mean, if you make a single garment for yourself, I mean, obviously you can choose whatever you prefer it, but just keep it in mind.
yeah, yeah.
Conscious
Good
decision
advice.
which way you want to go.
100%. And then when you place the pattern pieces, then I guess we also have two camps. We have the pattern weights camp, or we have the needle or pins. I mean pins camp. So which camp are you in, Malena?
Well, I think this goes hand in hand if you are team scissors or team rotary cutters.
Yeah,
And I am
rotary.
team, yeah, I am team scissor and pins for
All
sure.
right. Oh, give me the pitch.
Well, first of all, I like to pin the pattern to the fabric so it stays there. I just like the feel like cutting. I feel like I have more control. I don't. it doesn't take that long either way, so I don't need the extra speed of a rotary cutter. And I feel like in some corners, it is more exact with the scissors. And I also prefer that the pattern is pinned to the fabric until the very last minute, until I'm gonna pin it together and actually sew it. Because then I don't lose pattern pieces, fabric pieces. I might accidentally assume it's a fabric
Mm.
scrap and throw it away. No, if it is pinned together with a pattern piece, I know exactly which one it is. Um, and 80% it's a habit. I've
Mm.
always done that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you get good with what you do often, right? So we just find it easier. Right? It's always difficult if you're switching techniques because you have a way of working it with it that you feel
Yeah,
comfortable with,
yeah.
and it's
And
gonna avoid you switching. Mm.
yeah, and with I think that's also like with the rotary cutter. I have tried it. I have had one at least, and I haven't had a big mat, but not big enough mats, and then you have to switch it around. And there's always like some on the rotary. It's fine if it's super sharp, but there's always like that little tint damage to the wheel, and then it's not gonna cut it properly. So I still need
Mm.
to recut it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I go with scissors.
Mm.
But you are team rotary cutter.
Yeah, I am Team Rotary Cutter. I'm holding one in my hand right now, and all the drawbacks that you mentioned, I totally agree with. But the need for speed is real, especially when you don't love cutting. And the rotary cutter, it's so fast, especially if you're cutting long straight lines, for instance, when making jeans. You just boom. It's like Formula One on the highway.
Yeah.
But of course, I do have a large cutting mat as well, so that's one of the reasons why I do love it. But I totally agree with you. You will not be able to do everything with a rotary cutter, so you definitely need a good pair of scissors as well, especially along those narrow curves and sharp corners. You definitely need to have a scissor. There are usually, I mean, there are a rotary cutter that comes in different blade sizing. So there's a smaller one, but I am definitely have had situation where I've accidentally managed to cut into things that shouldn't be cut into because of the rotary cutter. It's like a surgery. You have to have respect. You know, you're working with knives.
And it's sharp. Oh my
Yeah,
god!
it's
Like
crazy
I
sharp.
mm,
It's, yeah, I mean, it's a miracle I haven't really sliced anything up except for fabric. but
mm.
But yeah, I'm a massive fan. It just made it so much easier for me. But I also agree with you that the blades tends to dull quite quickly. So that means that I have to buy blades in bulk, especially if I'm working with either dense fabric like denim fabric or also some type of some synthetic fabrics that are a little bit difficult. And as soon as you start feeling a little bit of resistance or that there is not all the threads get cut, then unfortunately it's time to switch a blade. And it's if you compare that to how long it takes for a pair of scissors to dull, then I guess the argument the scissors win. I mean, they are way more durable for sure. So I'm not gonna say get a rotary cutter, but I will say if you hate cutting out pattern pieces, then maybe you should try one of these. Because for me, it's been a game changer. Yeah,
Oh, and
which
especially when
mm,
it comes to cutting like bias tape or cutting long strips straight fabric. Yeah, 100% rotary cutter
mm,
together with a ruler. I mean,
mm,
yeah,
yeah.
hands down, no questions. It's so much easier
Mm.
than.
So you probably need to get both. I mean, Johanna
Yeah.
is, I am the resident gearhead in this podcast, and Malena is much more minimalistic. And I'm like, if there's something that can speed up or improve anything, I am the target of that kind of marketing. So I have, I have I think I have three different rotary cutters, and they're basically the same. But for some reason, I always feel like I need another one. I don't. So sometimes a little bit of the angle, or some a little bit more ergonomic. The one I'm holding now, I like that better than because it has like an ergonomic handle. I like those better one than they are quite straight. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, try out and also as you say, like it some things are so much easier with a rotary cutter, and some things are better
Mm.
with the scissors. So I mean, you don't have to choose either. I
Well,
mean, you can do both depending on the project,
yeah.
obviously.
And rotary cutter isn't that expensive. You can buy them quite cheaply. And what I'm holding in my hand now is not a pin, but a pattern weight. And I'm just as you hinted, I do like my pattern weights because I like my rotary cutter, and they go hand in hand. Uh, I You don't have to invest in expensive pattern weights. So what I'm holding is metal washers that you put on piping and things like that. You buy them in any hardware store. They comes in lots of different sizes. The only trick is that you should use a thicker one so that it has some built-in weight. But apart from that, these are absolutely wonderful, and I will also post a picture of these over at our Instagram account, stitchingtalespod, just so you can see. Um, I honestly don't pin much at all. I just pin stuff that I have to, and but regardless, uh, I will say one tip that I personally am a big fan of, and I think you are too, is that you don't have to overpin. You don't have to, because sometimes maybe when you're new to sewing, you have a tendency you don't want the fabric or the pattern piece to slip, so you might end up putting lots of pins all the way around. And in my opinion, that you risk distorting the fabric because every time you pin, especially if it's a little bit thicker, there's always a risk that you pinch the fabric, so it when you cut it out, it might not lie straight anymore. So what's your take on that?
Yeah,
Do you like?
no, I pin basically all like outer corners, and if it's a long like if it's a leg inseam, I pin it. I mean, in the corners, and then
Mm,
once, maybe twice on the outer seam that is longer.
mm,
So it's I don't pin so much either. It's because
no.
yeah, as you said, it gets a little bit distorted and just annoying pinning and
Mm.
unpinning everything. Then no need to
You
overdo it.
Right. You can also, I mean, you can use your hands to hold down the pattern pieces when you're cutting because there is always a risk that you will slip. So you definitely need to add some type of resistance. At least I find I when I forget to do that, I usually tend to slip, especially since I'm going so fast with my my speedy rotary cutter. And also we have markings and notching. So how do you mark notches?
I not just I just cut in the seam allowance,
Mm, mm,
and I'm trying to think now. Like I think I cut along as I go, to be honest. I mean, when I come to that place when I'm cutting out the fabric, and there is a notch, I cut it immediately. I
mm,
don't even cut out the whole pattern piece and then cut the notches. I do it as I go. Um, Darts and markings on the if it's like not in the edge but like inside, then I do it straight afterwards. Um, while the like pattern is still pinned to the fabric, I never remove the pattern and then a few days later put it back on and then draw the dart or something. I do
mm.
it straight away because then everything is in place. It hasn't been moved. It doesn't shift then. Um, and it's not forgotten when you start to sew and you realize, oh, I forgot to do it. So do that along as you go, is my
Yeah.
strong recommendation, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I use the same technique. Normally, I use scissors for just you need to obviously you need to have a sharp scissors that you can cut tiny notches because you don't want to cut them all the way through the to the seam line because then of course the seam might break or the fabric might break. But I do that as well. And otherwise I use some type of marking tools. And by the way, of course, we've done an entire episode on how to mark your fabric. So if you learn all the ways you can do it and the ones that we prefer, we can definitely head over to that episode if you haven't listened to that one already, because I think we do a pretty thorough job on explaining all the ways of marking. And I agree with you. Always mark as you sew, because I think all these kind of things. It's the same with interfacing. Don't postpone that. Do all things, because when if you're in the right headspace, it's just so much easier. I mean, sometimes because I have not cut the interfacing or the lining at the same time, it can literally put me off starting the project because I'm like, oh, then I have to cut these again. So, as much as possible, do that when you're already in the right mindset and all have your tools ready and your table ready. Um, that's a good tip, I think.
Yeah, and if you have fusible interfacing, if you're gonna do that on a lot of pattern pieces,
Mm.
fuse the whole fabric like a
Yeah.
piece of fabric that you know that this is gonna be enough. Not too much. You don't want to waste
Mm.
fusing, but do it straight away on the fabric, and then you cut it out. Uh,
Mm.
like fine, like already fused fabric.
Yeah.
So much easier than compared to
Yeah.
cutting twice and then have to pairing it. Then maybe it's a few millimeters off here and there, and it get glued on the ironing board. And I mean, you hear that I've done this the hard
Yeah.
way a couple of
Same.
times.
Yeah, it's so easy to distort either the fabric or the interfacing when you're
Yeah.
cutting. It's really hard to get them aligned, and I do cut them separately just because I like to save interfacing and fabric. But I mean, it's way easier to do the way you say. If you want to make sure that the result is really top notch, I definitely think it's a much better way to first fuse the fabric and then cut all the things. And I mean, essentially, I also think you save time by doing that because it
Mhm.
doesn't take too long to press the interface into or fuse the interface into the fabric. So that's a really good idea. I should do that more as well. Sometimes I do struggle with that, for sure.
Yeah.
Another
One
thing
thing
you said,
too.
hmm?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry,
No.
yeah,
I was gonna
you
say
start.
seam allowance.
Yeah,
Double check that your fabric, that your pattern has, if it has seam allowance or if you need to
mm,
add it. Because if it doesn't have seam allowance and you thought it would, and you sew it, it might actually be a size too small then.
yeah,
So double check if it has seam allowance or if you need to add it yourself. And you can add
yeah,
wider seam allowance if you want to. If you think that the fit is, you don't want to do like a prototype and do the fitting on that one. You want to go straight to your own fabric. You can of course add a little bit of extra seam allowance, so you have a little bit of extra give if you realize that you need to increase it a little bit. So you can add more seam allowance also if you want to.
mm, yeah. Very good tip. And you could either, of course, add the seam allowance if you place tissue paper on top of your pattern, and then you draft the seam allowance. Along the seam line, and then you have the tissue paper with the seam allowance included, or you can draft them, mark them, but it all depends on the fabric. Some fabric is easier. For instance, if you're sewing denim or twill, it's pretty easy to mark the seam allowance onto the fabric. But if for instance, working with the stretch and knit fabrics, it doesn't really take those marking tools very well, then it's probably much better to add the seam allowance onto tissue paper before you start cutting. That, at least I find that being quite helpful.
Yeah, I mean whatever method you prefer, it's yeah, but remember to double check this one because
Yeah,
it is so annoying. If you
it's
gotta
so
things out.
annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially if you're all using an older European pattern, for instance, there's a big risk that the seam allowance is not included. And because that was the standard here in Europe back in the days, it wasn't always noted on the pattern pieces that you should add seam allowance because it was just assumed that you
Mm.
did add seam allowance. Whereas today, a lot of pattern pieces might have on the pattern, the seam allowance and also how much, but you cannot assume because it all depends on where the pattern comes from and if it's an older or newer pattern. It's and also, of course, that the you have to check that this is seam allowance you want to use. For instance, I mean, if you feel that the seam allowance of 1.5 centimeters, 1/5 of an inch is a bit too wide, maybe you should trim away some of the seam allowance as well before, because it can be a little bit tricky to do that afterwards as well. So you can do that already when you're cutting out the fabric, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's all
Uh,
personal preferences how wide it is, but
mm,
always you always need to just know how much it is. I mean, I always when I was in school and back in when it was a hobby of mine and I sewed just for myself. We never had seam allowance on our
Mm.
pattern pieces. We always added it on when we actually cutted the fabric. And to be honest, I didn't mark anything. I just cutted. I mean, I'm pretty good at gauging like how much one
Mm.
centimeter is. So I just cut it in on freehand then. But yeah, it's either way. Just make sure you know.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but speaking of gadget, one thing I don't have, I should probably get it. I've seen that there are the kind of this magnet seam allowance gauge that you can place, I guess, on your scissors. So the distance is seam allowance, so then you can
Mm.
just align that with the cut pattern piece, and that's a pretty clever
Yeah,
way of doing it. Mm.
yeah, yeah. No, there are good tips and tricks there out there. If
Mm.
you Google it, it's
And finally, once you cut it all, you mentioned it previously, but we have to think about how to know which piece is which afterwards. So you said that you like to keep the pattern pieces on top of the cut fabric pieces, right? When
yeah.
you start sewing.
Yeah, they are combined, pinned together until
Mm,
the moment when I actually start pinning them together and sew it. They are,
mm,
yeah, it's so much easier to do it this way. Also you then know a little bit better if you, for example, some fabric, I mean, you see easily which are the right and the wrong side. But some fabric, there is actually no difference. And I mean, if there
mm,
is no difference at all, then it doesn't matter. But you don't obviously want to twist one leg and not the other because then all of a sudden it's not going to be matching. Um, so it also helps me to know which side is the right and the wrong side.
mm.
And you do it with the tape. You mark the
Yeah, I
right
do the
sides, right?
tape. I mean, sometimes since I use pattern weights, I sometimes I pin the pattern pieces to the fabric afterwards. But I'm a big fan of using just freezer tape or marking tape, where I just write the number or the pattern piece name or the right side like an R, so I know which go where. I found that really helpful. Just any type of tape that will not stick to the fabric. It's very easy to remove. Is super helpful as well. But also I do what you do as well. I pin pieces. Because you do sometimes you cut something and then you won't end up sewing it, and weeks later it's so difficult.
Yeah, sometimes if you have moved around the fabric and you just
Uh,
cut the small notches on the sleeve head, usually there is one notch in the front sleeve and two notches in the back sleeve on the sleeve head or sleeve cap. And if you cut it really small, you might not really see where it is. So if the pattern is pinned to the fabric, you see it right then and there,
mm,
which is what. So it avoids those easily annoying mistake to, yeah,
mm,
pin it wrongly, incorrectly.
yeah, that's a really good idea. Have we covered everything now? I guess we could go over to new ones, but I will also say you can definitely go back if you want to learn more to check out previous episode. We have done, as I said, one about marking fabric. We have talked about how to cut knit fabrics in particular. I know that episode. And we also talked about pre-washing things previously as well. I will list some of the episodes in the show notes for this episode. So if you want to go back and learn more in depth about all the specific things that we talked about, because it's such a big topic,
Yeah,
I
it
really
is.
said,
Yeah,
yeah.
one thing that I do still want to mention, if you cut out, this goes also a little bit for woven, but mostly for jersey or any fabric that stretches. Um, you can't have it on the table and then it falls on the floor and then yeah, the fabric gets
Mm,
stretched out. And when you
yeah.
cut it, when it's slightly stretched out, then it's obviously going to shrink back to its original shape in the end, and then it's going to be too short. So the fabric
Mm,
can't be stretched when you cut it. That is super important. So it needs to be relaxed. It needs to be in its natural shape, so to
mm,
say. So that is specific to stretchy fabric, but that's
yeah.
so important.
So if you, for instance, have a sewing table, then I recommend that you roll it up like into a roll. So to just make sure that everything, even if you have more fabric than the table allows for, you make sure that you have all the fabric, as you say, on top of it.
Mm.
Don't let it hang,
Yeah.
because just a little bit can cause it to stretch up, especially when you're working with these four-way stretchy fabrics. They have a tendency of stretching in, and obviously in any type of direction because that's a property. It's a good thing, but it can definitely affect that. So I usually just roll it into a little bit of a sausage at the end of my cutting table, and then if I need to more fabric, if it's not wide enough on the cutting table, I just roll up a little bit more once I cut some of the pieces. That's how I deal with that. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No, so that's
that's probably one of the benefits of cutting on the floor.
yeah,
That you
true. You don't have that issue then, but yeah, that is such an important thing. And the reason why we are like emphasizing also like following the grain liner thing, both for jersey and bowen. If it is slightly distorted, the fabric piece might start to twist in a way that it's
Mm,
not supposed to be, and if it's washed as well, it might start to tilt or twist, and it doesn't. Yeah, it also will feel a bit weird when you wear it because it stretches out a little bit more in one direction and not the other. So that's why it's so important to follow the grain line.
mm.
And also, well, maybe this is because we have done this so much, but you can kind of see it when it is not cutted along the grain line.
Yeah.
It looks tilted, to be honest.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it does. I know sometimes it can be a design feature, but you definitely want it to be intentional. You don't want to be accidental. And then you want to have everything cut in a similar off grain line direction. For instance, if you're cutting on the bias or slightly tilted to get a
Mm.
specific effect. I know sometimes in denim making, in jeans, it's trendy to cut slightly off the grain to get the kind of twisted look, but you do want that to be intentional and not accidental. So for the most part, follow the grain line. I think that's a good rule of thumb, and take your
Yeah.
time to make sure that you actually know this, especially if you're cutting um, double layers fabrics, because it can be you have to make sure that both layers are also evenly and, as we
Mm.
say, aligned,
So
because
easy that the underlayer is gonna be thin
yeah,
as well.
that's happened to me for sure, especially when you're working with knits. That's why, again, I'm a fan of cutting a lot of things as a single layer, because I think it just gives me more control. I'm a little bit neurotic on that topic. All right. Well, I think that was pretty much it. And if you have any more suggestions or comments, you can always contact us on our social. You can drop a comment on our YouTube channel, Stitching Tales Pod, or over the Instagram account. And we should also mention that spread the word about the
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, please share it with a friend, share it on
Yeah.
social. We want to reach out to more people, and if you have the time, give us a review either on you can do it on Spotify and on
On Apple.
podcast. Yeah, Apple Pod. Yeah, that makes us easier to reach out to new people. So if you would take the time, we would be so thrilled.
Yeah, yeah, big thank you in advance. We would definitely be very, very grateful. Because we feel pretty proud of ourselves now. We've been consistent with this podcast for 1.5 year. I think in a couple of months' time, we will celebrate our 100th episode, which I think is
That's
already
amazing.
that will be amazing. Yeah, so we love all the support, and we're so glad that you have found this podcast. And as Malena says, it would be wonderful if you want to spread the word as well. And we're so grateful for you taking the time to listen to us every week.
Yes, it has been lovely for everyone. You that you have been following us. We are so grateful for that.
Yeah. All right. Then I think that was all for this episode. My name is Johanna Lundström.
And my name is Malena Hjerpe. Bye bye.
Bye bye.